all the researchers, everybody knew that my granddad had said the only reason he stayed alive was because he had these tapes. And that if LBJ or whoever else was involved had my granddad killed, these tapes were going to be released. It's kind of fascinating how many people died. Not many people lived, except my granddad. He lived till 2012.
Welcome back to Going Rogue with Lara, Logan, and I have a fascinating guest this week. As you know, as everybody knows, JFK assassination has been the subject of much conspiracy and speculation for decades, and with the latest release of classified documents by the Trump administration, it was kind of a nothing burger in some ways, right? Because we didn't find out a whole lot more. Still, the theory of the lone gunman, learned a lot more about the workings of the CIA, but we didn't really answer any of the big questions, such as, was there more than one shooter? And was LBJ involved? Lyndon Johnson, was he involved in the assassination? So, my guest today is a gentleman by the name of Shane Stevens. Hello, Shane.
Well, thanks for having me, Laura. Awesome place you have here.
Well, thank you very much. We do our best. You're my neighbor in Texas, living in Austin, but born in Abilene, Texas, and your family goes all the way back, right, into the mid-1800s?
Yeah, early settlers in Texas, Clyde, Texas.
Right, Clyde, Texas, and you were born in Abilene. And you're really here today because you're of your grandfather.
Right. Yeah.
Billy Sol Estes.
Estes.
Did I say it right?
Yeah, you did.
With my South Africanisms.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, who was, for you and your family, was once one of the richest men in the state of Texas.
Right.
But to quote you, became a fall guy for Lyndon Johnson, right, who was involved in all kinds of things. So I just think, I met your wife. That's how I heard about you, and I thought it was so fascinating. Here we are right in the heart of the JFK mystery or scandal or whatever you want to call it. And there are real people who have little pieces of the truth.
Right.
And you and your family have been sitting on one of those pieces for a long time.
Yeah, since I think he started recording stuff in the 60s. And then this tape, I believe, was recorded in the early 70s.
So this tape, by that, we're jumping ahead a little bit. So I want to just frame this for people. So obviously, there's been a lot of speculation about whether Lyndon Johnson was involved in JFK's death, along with the CIA, with his assassination, and whether, John Wilkes Booth acted alone or not.
Lee Harvey
Oswald. Damn it. I knew as I said it, I was going to mess that up. And whether Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone or not. Or whether there was a lone gunman. Whether, that theory is really true. I don't believe that for a second, but that's a whole nother forensics conversation that I've had many times in the last few years. But really, you're here because your family, your grandfather left behind some tapes that relate directly to the assassination. One of those recordings you've been on Alex Jones, you've been on Glenn Beck.
Right.
You've been talking about it lately.
Yes.
And we're going to listen to that. We're going to hear about that. But we also have a few things that haven't been shared.
Yeah, there's a couple of old DVDs, and one of them I think is just an audio, which frankly I haven't listened to. And then another one is one that I saw a long time ago, and it's called The Guilty Men. So I remember a gentleman from France coming over and recording stuff with my granddad, and I think my granddad was paid some money, so that way they did this interview. And it really helped to expose a lot of this over in France. And so it's kind of funny, it took off over there, but here the media, the news, all that, they suppressed it, and so we don't get to see as much here in the U.S., but now with you and a lot of other patriots pushing out and decentralizing the media, finally Americans have a chance to hear a lot of this.
And for people who don't know you, you're a Christian and a husband and a father and a patriot and a businessman. I know you have a whole bunch of businesses. Yes. Can I say that you may or may not be thinking about taking a role in the administration, possibly?
If offered the opportunity, I'd certainly be all about it.
To do what?
just serve in some capacity, put my entrepreneurial endeavors on hold, and then potentially serve President Trump or somewhere within the administration.
Well, I know that you and your wife and even your children, at least one of your children, your son, right?
Yeah.
Did he do the lemonade stand?
Yeah, lemonade and then hot chocolate. So
lemonade
he did
and
both,
hot chocolate,
depending on
right?
what the weather was like.
And he was doing that for what?
So he was raising money for the border wall, and that started when he was 7 years old.
Yeah.
And you can look him up. So for the viewers, if you want to look him up, it's sad to say this, but look up Benton's Hot Chocolate Stand or Little Hitler is what the left named him.
I remember that.
Because they were saying that we're racist because we were trying to support the border wall back in, that was probably 2017. And they didn't get, now everybody knows about the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the drugs.
Yes.
It's kind of common knowledge, but back then it was the whole bandwagon of you're racist if you want a border wall.
Yes. So you're an interesting family, to say the least. Okay, so from your point of view, that's who your grandfather was. If you look, sort of in the, I hate to say the record of history because you want that record to be accurate, and we don't really know. But he has been slandered as a fraudster.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So if I think it's Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. Mm-hmm. In it talks about how you go about character assassination and how to defame somebody and, how to attack them and go after them. And they still do that today. Whether you look at the January Sixers or you look at Mike Lindell or different folks that have stood up for what's right, they come after them. I mean, all barrels are blazing. So with my granddad, he was really embroiled in a battle between LBJ and JFK, or the Kennedys and LBJ. And they were trying to get to LBJ, and so the easiest way to do that was his cronies back here in Texas. So they went after my granddad and Bobby Baker kind of at the same time. But if it tells you anything, my granddad's court case was the first ever televised court case. If you can go back to the early 60s, mm-hmm. and it's like, holy cow, we're getting to watch a court case live that has to do with this scandal and this, I think he was worth 400 to 600 million in the 60s, so it'd be certainly a billionaire in today's terms.
That's a lot of money.
Watching him go on trial and
makes me think of Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, they wanted everybody to see it.
Oh yeah.
So what was he on trial for?
They came after him for a few things. One was selling non-existent anhydrous ammonia storage fertilizer tanks, which basically is taking deposits on sales to get credit to kind of continue to build and fund and whatnot.
But they said he was selling something he didn't have.
Right. And then the other one I think may have had to do with grain storage contracts, to where him and Lyndon were involved in a deal of Lyndon had apparently told my granddad if he would get a certain governor elected into office here in the state of Texas, John Conley, then he would get all of the grain storage contracts he wanted. And so, the back and forth, pay for play, I think my granddad said that he gave Lyndon $10 million over the years. So a lot of money. And I think Lyndon used a lot of that to pay other people off. But perhaps he, when Lyndon retired from office, I think he was worth $25 million in the 70s. It's a lot of money.
Sounds familiar. Kind of like Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Nancy and Paul are doing well.
Yeah, they're doing well. They're so gifted. They just have this incredible talent for the markets.
Yes,
it's incredible. It's amazing.
Yeah, their timing, impeccable.
Well, I guess, it's so interesting to me because we're sitting right not far, what are we, 30, 40 minutes away from Johnson City, where Lyndon Johnson was born. I've been past the house. Mm-hmm. You can go and people can go and see it. Ladybug Johnson Park is up the road here, and the Johnson Golf Course actually is one of the best municipal golf courses in the country. So,
wow.
And here you're a Texan, everybody knows that here it's sort of common knowledge that Lyndon Johnson stole his way into office, right? And maybe that's reflected in the fact that he really wasn't a popular figure. He's not remembered kindly.
Yeah. Anytime you start to research Lyndon, you start to come across fraud, schemes, scandals, kind of
assassinations,
poor character, assassinations.
Prior to JFK, actually.
Yeah. He had a hitman that went around with him, Malcolm Wallace. And actually, after I released the tape the first time, his family reached out to me, Malcolm Wallace, the hitman's family. And they're like, hey, just so you know, your story aligns, like your family secrets align with our family secrets.
Okay, so what is the family secret then? Is it a hypothesis? What is it that you think is revealed to you through your grandfather's story and his recordings that people don't know?
Yeah, so the more I've looked into it, the easier it is to really discern what happened. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it can be, this tape can be kind of a foundational starting point for that. So if you start to look into Billy Sol Estes, Clifton C. Carter, then you look into Bill Decker, I think it's W.O. Bankston, all these names that are mentioned on this tape. And you start to kind of link together who's who. And then Madeline Brown was a household name. That was LBJ's mistress. So you start to pull together all of these stories, and they all match. And it's like there's no way all these different people talking at different times about the same thing, but their stories align and point to LBJ, CIA, to some degree the FBI.
Yeah, and yet what was disappointing is that none of this was confirmed in the newly declassified JFK documents.
Right. Yeah, no, I've been asked a lot before they released the documents of, well, what do you think is going to be in there? Do you think that we're going to find it and it's all going to be there? And I was like, I've got a 20% chance that maybe folks were narcissistic enough to say, I really want to tell this story. And so I'm going to leave this for somebody to find way down the road. But the experts on this whole subject, they say that there's been approximately 100 murders to help keep this covered up. You don't go around killing 100 people and then have a big file box that tells everybody how it works. I'm not a presidential assassin or a murderer, but I don't think you do that.
No, I don't think you do that.
No.
It's kind of like when you see it in the movies, they always say, take care of it. They don't say, kill him.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they want to be able to say, well, when I said take care of it, I didn't mean kill him.
Well, yeah. And they talk about, Jack Ruby, Jakob Rubenstein. He's a known affiliate of the mob. And mobsters don't go around there like, hey, be sure and document what you did.
Oh, yes. No, we need meticulous
records.
Use
the notepad. And that way we can hold on to that.
Yeah. Those are dictators like Saddam Hussein.
Right.
Well, okay, let's listen to this and hear who's on this.
So it'll start out with my granddad talking. Mm-hmm. And if you want, I can kind of pause and catch y'all up to speed every 30 seconds or something. But what's important, all the researchers, everybody knew that my granddad had said the only reason he stayed alive was because he had these tapes. And that if LBJ or whoever else was involved had my granddad killed, these tapes were going to be released. I didn't really research the amount of deaths in the late 60s and early 70s until probably a few weeks ago. It's kind of fascinating how many people died. Not many people lived, except my granddad. He lived till 2012. So it's fascinating. And most of them were dying of heart attacks.
And died of natural causes?
Oh, yeah.
Your grandfather did?
Yeah. He died of natural causes. But he's talking, and this is what's fascinating, with Clifton C. Carter. So you can research Cliff Carter, and that's where it gets interesting because Cliff was a direct, tight, close LBJ affiliate for 30 years. Starting, I think, back in the 30s. And then he went off to war, fought in World War II, came back, served with LBJ all the way up. And he was his right-hand man. As close as, he was like what Elon is to Trump right now. Mm-hmm. That's Cliff Carter to LBJ. So you basically have that level of closeness of the largest donor and then the closest. Which was
your grandfather.
Right. Yeah, or one of the largest. And one of the closest allies or affiliates, both talking about the same thing, very calm.
And they're talking to each other on this.
Yes.
Recording. That's what we have here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this recording was made when?
I believe it was 1972. So it was in a short time frame because in that same year, my granddad was released from prison. I remember picking him up, and that was out in Big Springs, Texas, where we picked him up.
How old were you?
I think 6. And I remember I was on the front page of the Abilene Reporter News, which I thought was cool, until I realized having a granddad that just got out of prison was not cool to the kids at school and their parents. So, it changed. But either way, I'm still proud of it, of, him getting out and the history. The older I get and the more I see what happened and understand it differently now. But it was embarrassing at the time. So
this conversation was taking place right after he got released from prison.
And then Cliff Carter died, I believe it was, say, October of 1972. And I've got a lot of dates in my head, so it could be 73, 71, I think it's 72. And so it was within maybe a 6-month time span. And then the history I'd always heard is supposedly Cliff Carter died like 3 days after this recording was done. Don't know if that's true, no way to know, but that's what was always told.
And were they just catching up? Is that what happened? Oh.
So I found some documents. A gentleman sent them to me from up north, a JFK researcher, and it basically said that Cliff was worried for his life just like my granddad was for his, and that he was knowledgeable about my granddad recording stuff. And so apparently before the assassination and all the way up to 1970, right before Cliff died, they had recorded this, just kind of giving a little recap of how things are going with LBJ and...
Almost like a dead man switch.
Dead man switch, I think is the exact word, or term.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, let's hear it.
It's sure good to see you. How's life treating you today?
Well, Sol, it's been a pretty touch-and-go situation. Lyndon and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal with that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far, and I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike, but we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he'd ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget. And the times that we've had in Texas, and the embarrassment that Lyndon had gotten from Kennedy, I guess there wasn't anything else to do but with what he did.
Well, you know, Lyndon could have really helped me if he would.
Well, Lyndon's the kind of person that doesn't want to help anyone.
That's mostly Cliff talking, and then your grandfather interjects, right?
You got it. So mostly Cliff, and he had finished up serving as executive director of the DNC at the time. And this really isn't a political issue. We should all seek the truth, right? But he was involved in the DNC and those circles as well.
Isn't that kind of odd? I mean, in a way, because he's head of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and I suppose it's old Texas Democrats, right? That's a different thing in that time.
It was the Solid South. So it's almost like, the Democrats then are the Republicans now.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of switched as far as the values and how all of that works. But, a lot of folks don't really get that. So it's important to note what he was saying is the embarrassment that LBJ had suffered at the hands of the Kennedys.
What did he mean by that?
So the Kennedys were trying to get LBJ out and off the ticket because they were going to run again, or, JFK was. They wanted LBJ, out of office. They knew that he was into fraud and schemes and kickbacks. The Henry Marshall scandal was, raging at the time as far as these agricultural cotton allotments. That was another thing my granddad was involved in. So he's basically saying, well, I don't think LBJ had another choice. I feel like we had to kill him. So that's kind of where they're at. And he did very, very specifically say Lyndon should have never given that order to Mac. So Malcolm Wallace is the hitman.
Yes.
So you can look him up, Mac Wallace, Malcolm Wallace, Mike Wallace, a lot of documented history there.
Those are all his different names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And he actually served time for murder.
So he killed Doug Kinzer, who was I think he's a golf pro in Austin. Walked in, shot him, cold blood, and it was over something to do with LBJ's sister, Josepha, and them having too much information on LBJ and Josepha drinking and whatnot. But he ended up having Mac kill Doug, and then he was sentenced to 5 years, but LBJ had him pulled out and he never served any time for it.
Was there one before that where he served some time? I read they didn't even say who he killed, but I read in a couple places that he had spent some time in prison for murder, but that could be wrong.
Maybe he did. Yeah, I'll have to research.
Well, okay, so that's kind of, amazing here, the way Cliff is just like, well, I guess he had to give that order. It's a real shame, but I guess he didn't have a choice.
Yeah, no,
Take
it's
out
like
the
just
president.
sitting here chatting like us. Well, yeah, we just had to kill the president.
But I do notice that he goes out of his way to say, I remain loyal to Lyndon as I've always been.
See, all right, you picked up on that.
Yeah.
Like, both my granddad and Cliff throughout it, like, I'm true blue like I've always been. They were still scared to death of Lyndon. They wanted to make it known that we're loyal to the cause. We're loyal to the Democrats. We're loyal to Lyndon. So that nothing's changed there, but we're going to clearly openly talk about this whole deal with assassinating JFK.
Okay, let's hear it some more.
He's all for Lyndon, and that's the way he's pretty much always been.
Well, they had me backed up on that Henry Marshall killing, and they just kind of blackmailed me to keep my mouth shut. And if I hadn't had a bunch of tapes that I'd played after I got killed, 17 got killed.
What's
in
he
this
talking about
situation
there?
very mysteriously.
17 got killed in this situation very
So-
mysteriously.
I'd always heard it as 13 got killed.
Yeah.
But I
That's
may
your
be confusing
grandfather
it with
there.
Box 13, but my granddad's saying 17. And so he tried to come clean with some of this in the mid 80s but they wouldn't give him immunity. The DA in El Paso just kept shutting it down. So he was trying to release on, say, Henry Marshall. He was the head or one of the higher ups in the Department of Agriculture, and he was over the cotton allotments. And so he had kind of caught on to what my granddad was doing, of essentially kind of buying cotton allotments, but it was through this really kind of fascinating strategic setup of how he was doing it. It was legal at one point, but then they kind of changed the legality of it. Well, Henry Marshall, they're saying that Malcolm Wallace went out and killed Henry Marshall. Now, it was ruled a suicide, but he was shot 5 times in the chest with a long rifle, had a contusion on his head, and he also had carbon monoxide poisoning. So he was really tough at killing himself. But my granddad went on record saying that he didn't kill himself, got that overturned. His widow was able to get life insurance money for it. And so he kind of helped restore a little bit of...
And that was in the 80s.
Yes.
Wow. That's really interesting. So he says they blackmailed him to keep his mouth shut.
Yeah, and I don't know what he meant there, but I'm assuming it's like, we're going to hurt your family, or we're going to come after you. He said Lyndon really could help me if he would, and Lyndon never pardoned him, never did anything to get him off of the fines. But really, they had taken all my granddad's wealth, so I don't think my granddad was of use to Lyndon. Lyndon knew my granddad had these tapes, and he was like, they're making him look crazy as all get out. That's probably better for me anyways.
Well, yeah, he doesn't have to, worry about killing him and having to deal with that because he's discredited, right? He's the fraudster, so everything he says is a lie.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Well, let's hear some more.
And I've done a lot of time, and I've lost a lot of money. It hurt my family a whole lot. And it's really got me disgusted with Lyndon in one way. In one way, I feel real sorry for him. But I really feel like that in Lyndon's heart, he felt like that he was doing the right thing. He felt like that he was savior of the common man. I feel like that in his heart, he wanted to help people that had not. But I don't believe that anything, my church right background would have never let me sanction all the killing that he has done. What do you think about it, Cliff? Do you really believe that it could have been handled anyway without killing all these people and got rid of the candidates? You think he won the election against him?
Well, I don't really believe so. He tried desperately to do just that, and there didn't seem to be any other way. I know that he regrets a lot of things that he has done, but still, it's been a battle from the day one.
Well, Daryl, I sure do appreciate all the things that you've done for Boris, and I appreciate the trust that I have. Yeah, you bet. Anytime. For a long-time friend.
All right, so Daryl, that's my uncle Daryl Bright.
Oh.
So
your uncle and your grandfather on the skull.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it was actually, supposedly is in person, according to my uncle Daryl. They'd gone out, I think, 30 miles outside of Abilene and recorded it in some old farmhouse or something along those lines. And Daryl at one point had been married to my Aunt Jan, and he may still have been at that time, but they had a daughter, Star, and so legitimately Star Bright. And she was like a sister to me. She passed away several years back. But at the time, Daryl, who they're talking about, he had started to get dementia in like 2015, 16, 17, somewhere in there. So he called Star and said, hey, I've held on to this tape forever. And Saul always told me I know what to do with it. I'm getting dementia. Saul's passed away. I don't want to just throw it away. So I want you to take it. And she's like, I don't want it. And so my brother Clay went and picked it up in Abilene, brought it back to me. And then we had them converted over to digital media. And we're like, oh my God, this is nuts. Like, what are the odds of us being maybe one out of like 100 people in the U.S. that really basically know what happened? And so we held on to them until whatever it was, January, when I finally released it. And I just felt it was kind of the right time. But
how long did you hold on to it for?
Probably about 8 to 10 years.
But you listened to it straight away.
Yeah, as soon as we got it, I had them taken over, and I didn't know what was on it.
Yeah.
But we sent it over to these folks that convert old media, like old VCR tapes or whatever, to digital media. And my assistant took it over there. Within a day, they called and they were furious. Like, you should have had us sign documents. Y'all need to sign an NDA that you're not going to say who did these tapes. And that's when I knew, I was like, there's some good stuff on here.
because everybody was panicking.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the guy that got Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah, exactly.
Get this away from me.
Yeah,
I don't want it. No. Don't kill me.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, so why is your grandfather bringing in Daryl there into the conversation?
I guess Daryl maybe had driven my granddad out there, or maybe he was the one that had the little recording device, or something along those lines. I really am not sure. I don't know that. We don't know that part of the story.
I don't know how much is left here, but let's finish it.
Sorry that I've embarrassed all my friends. You put all my friends through this. Oh, you didn't embarrass me. And what I was really afraid of, my brother Bob that got killed, our plane was down at Bryan the day that Mike Wallace killed Henry Marshall. And I was afraid just going to tie him into the thing, and we couldn't afford to. In fact, Pam started to write a book, and she really got scared when she got into the thing. It was just too scary a deal. But anyhow, this too will pass. Well, it's been a long, long old journey. What do you think about F.O. Bankston?
Well, W.O. is a great leader, and he's been probably one of the best things that ever happened in Dallas, Texas. Of course, he's got a lot of real good friends, and Lyndon's been one of his true buddies for many, many years. And anything that he just have to have W.O. see that it's done.
Well, I just can't believe that F.O. Bankston has the power over the police department that he has. He buys every year of the sheriff, buys him a brand new car, Bill Decker. And I just don't see how politically that he can get with it. But nobody will ever understand. And really, in the early years, I thought that Lyndon really had a mission from a higher power, who I choose to call God, to carry out a lot of things for the common people. And I really believe in his heart that he thought that he was destined to rule the people. How do you size up Lyndon Cliff after all these years, Para?
Well, actually, Lyndon's just been kind of going downhill health-wise, politically-wise. He's just wore out. And I feel like he's come to his end of his rope. But all these things that's been eating on him for all these years have just now taken his course. And I feel like Lyndon's done a lot of good things in life, and he's done a lot of bad things.
Well, Cliff, I hate to see you so downtrodden and so discouraged. And I just hope that you can get a hold of yourself and not be so tore up. But anyhow, let's go in the house and let's have a cup of coffee and something to eat. Okay?
Sounds good to me, Saul.
Okay.
So when he says there, let's go into the house, where were they?
I think it's some little farmhouse outside of Abilene, according to my Uncle Daryl.
But they weren't in the farmhouse, they were recording it in the barn or somewhere else?
Yeah, maybe they were out in the barn outside of the house or something like that.
What were they using to record that?
Well, so it was on one of those little mini cassettes. It's like a Panasonic mini cassette.
Yes.
And one of the experts, a guy named Dory, he says, he's like, well, it could be a copy of it or it could be the original, but chances are what happened is my granddad took that and made multiple copies of it and handed them out to multiple people because there's another lady that supposedly has a tape or tapes as well. And I'm curious if it's the same tapes that my Uncle Daryl had or if they're different. But apparently, I think if I recall, it's like 6 or 12 people that he had given tapes to hold. And as the dead man's switch or trigger.
Yeah. That keeping that in case something happened to him. Okay, so it was interesting there the way your grandfather said to him, you know, I hate to see you so discouraged and so down.
Right.
You don't know what he was talking about there?
Well, so he supposedly died, I think it was of a heart attack in D.C. not too long after that, allegedly 3 days later. But, you know, clearly he wasn't in good health. I know at the time, Alex Jones actually filled me in on this, that LBJ was like smoking pot. He had grown his hair out. He was kind of like losing his mind a little bit. And so I think you start to look at these people that were involved in the assassination. I think especially after they got out of power, it probably took a toll on their health of like, nobody's here to protect us. No, I don't have the power and authority to control all this anymore. You know, and I think guilt and remorse has to kick in at a certain point because, I mean, it's not like they just killed a president. You know, they stole a father, they stole a husband, they stole a brother. Like they really messed up that family to some degree.
Well, I mean, and, you know, if all of this is true, JFK wasn't the only person that LBJ had killed. So he says in there that it's all these things Lyndon's done are eating on him.
Yeah.
You know, which is a great way to put it, really.
Yeah.
My mother would say there's a price for everything and, you know, no one gets off scot-free. So at some point, right, those demons.
Yeah, they start to take hold, and then you have to try and fight it, and there's really nothing you can do. I mean, you can repent. I guess God can forgive it, but it doesn't mean that you as yourself are going to forgive because you know what you did.
So were you close to your grandfather? Is it strange for you to hear his voice on these recordings?
You know, I was close to him, and I never really mourned too much his loss or anything, and it's just because it was, I don't know, like I didn't know if I should believe him or not. And I thought maybe he was making some of this up and that he didn't take the fall for LBJ and that he was worse of a person than like he let on. And he wasn't perfect by any means. Like he was absolutely involved in pay for play and some pretty tactful strategic finance operations and whatnot. But comparatively, like what he did then is so minuscule. And so it really has kind of changed my mindset of just being involved in this and having to prepare for these and researching. And like researching the names on the tape. Like if you start to look up W.O. Bankston and Bill Decker and the history of those guys. Like, it's fascinating.
So who was W.O. Bankston then?
He became one of the largest car dealers in like the Dallas area. Mm-hmm. And that's the one that he was saying, well, he buys Bill Decker a car every year.
Yes, the sheriff.
The sheriff. So you look back and it's like, well, do those guys know each other? And yeah, sure enough, Sheriff Decker, he found W.O. Bankston coming into town on a freight car or something like that in the 30s. And he was going to kick him out of town. And then Bankston was like, no, I've got a job. He was lying. But either way, Bill Decker took him under his wing. And sure enough, he became the head of like the Texas group that approved car dealerships or rejected them. So that way he could control that.
So he had a lot of power.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then Bill Decker, I'm like, why is that name on this tape? Who cares? He led the motorcade in the Kennedy assassination. He was in the front car. And then his office helped immediately investigate it, arrested Lee Harvey Oswald, was involved in transporting him when Jack Ruby shot him. So, I think he's trying to tell us something there. Yes,
by bringing his name into it, right? Sort of pointing you in that direction.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, so you played this, on a couple of other shows, and it got a lot of attention. But you found some other things that haven't been heard as widely, right?
Yeah. So it was in France. A gentleman from France, he came over and he recorded a lot of this, did some investigation, talked to fingerprint experts, went and looked at graves, did some research, and then he took that back to France and played it there. It couldn't be aired here in the U.S. because Jack Valente was still the head of the Motion Picture Association at the time, and part of his appointment and job was to make sure nothing bad about LBJ would ever come out.
How do you know that?
Just that's kind of what we had been told, historically speaking. And then if you look at the movie JFK that Oliver Stone put out, he was like, I will never do another movie on JFK again, because they gave him such a hard time about just what he had put in there, and he didn't have the depth of this.
So the LBJ Mafia lived on beyond his death.
Oh, yeah. He put a lot of really cool stuff in place that would kind of help control the narrative of, he had somebody that's over the media, the news, and then somebody over the Motion Picture Association. He set up the National Public Radio and all this and funded that to where the radio waves could kind of...
So it's his fault we have NPR.
Yeah, exactly.
It's another reason to be mad at LBJ.
I know. Just add to the list.
Killing Kennedy wasn't enough. Right. You gave us NPR to torture us for for decades, for generations afterwards.
Yeah, they haven't reached out to me for an interview on this subject.
Really? I'm shocked.
It's crazy.
Well, okay, so maybe we can see a little bit of this. What's the movie called? The documentary?
The Guilty Men.
The Guilty
Men. Documentary,
Men.
And we probably have to give credit to who produced it or something like that. I just don't know his name or enough detail. I just have an old DVD of it. But
I know as attorney for Lyndon Johnson that he murdered John Kennedy. He murdered John Kennedy to become president and to avoid prison. And there is no doubt in my mind.
You can't kill the President of the United States unless the next president, the head of the FBI, and the head of the Secret Service are in on the cover-up. In 1948, when he was running for the Senate, and he was running against a man named Coke Stevenson, and the election was very, very close, very small number of votes, which forced a recount. And once they did the recount, they found out a 201 vote error in a little place called Alice, Texas. And eventually they found out that the 201 votes had been added. 1 for Stevenson, 200 for LBJ. As a result, he won by 87 votes, and he was nicknamed Landslide Lyndon.
But the real name, the name used in the backwards that didn't appear in the newspapers, was Lion Lyndon. And that stuck with him the rest of his life.
That rigged ballot became the template for a political career based on bribery and corruption. The full extent of Johnson's criminal activity only began to unravel 11 years after his death. In 1984, at this courthouse in Franklin, Texas, a former Johnson business associate, Billy Sol Estes, appeared before a grand jury.
According to Billy Sol Estes,
that's your grandfather.
There were 8 murders perpetrated on the part of Lyndon Johnson. The first name was a man named Douglas Kinzer. That was followed by a number of men involved in Estes' businesses who were corrupt, and they were all killed with carbon monoxide. Josepha Johnson's name is listed on this Justice Department document. That's Lyndon Johnson's sister. So Estes is accusing the Vice President of the United States of murdering his own sister. And the eighth name listed is the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy.
Wow.
And then there is a promise of knowing more. And if Billy Sol Estes is telling the truth, and there is every reason to believe he is, it gives you an idea of the depth of the corruption and the ruthlessness of Lyndon Johnson.
This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
Here's a message from our partner, Dr. Kirk Elliott. Something big is happening in the markets. So big, I have to bring your attention to it. On February 3rd this year, President Donald Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent signed an executive order to create a sovereign wealth fund, committing to monetizing the assets of the U.S. balance sheet. Meanwhile, the Bank of England is running out of gold. So desperate, they're paying 16% a month just to borrow it. And where is all that gold going? Right here to the U.S., with a drastic increase in metal shipments to CME Comics vaults. Is President Trump preparing to repatriate and monetize America's gold? Elon Musk and former Congressman Ron Paul, through Doge, are planning an audit of the gold in Fort Knox. Major news for the silver market: 80% of all refinery-bound silver comes from Mexico. With American silver refineries already facing a 3-month backlog, this could send prices soaring overnight. President Trump is the catalyst for these historic economy-shifting events. As he says, we are entering the golden age of America. Take advantage of Trump's golden age by owning the asset that has the potential to back our currency. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals today to reposition your portfolio into gold and silver at 720-605-3900 or visit laralogangold.com. So, did your grandfather, did he talk to you about any of this?
No. So it's funny, like you could hear his voice on there on the recording earlier of how he talked, and it's kind of this high-pitched noise. I mean, I remember it like yesterday. Because as we got older, we were like, we want to know. Like, is this real or is he making it up?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we had asked him, me and Clay, cousins, like, so Saul, seriously, do you know who killed JFK? Was LBJ behind it? Please, like, you can trust us now. And he'd be like, well, grandson, Mimi's making some breakfast in there in the kitchen if anybody's hungry. Like, he wouldn't tell us anything. And so Barr McClellan that's on there, I've got his book in that little basket, but it's called Blood, Money, and Power. So I learned so much from Barr after my granddad passed away, because Barr made my granddad a promise that he would work to get him a pardon and get the truth out. So Barr has literally sacrificed financially, his reputation, his name to get this out. And he's the one that told me, because he was one of the lawyers working in the group that handled Lyndon's money, that when he got out, he was worth $25 million. And he knew because he was part of managing that.
So he basically, Barr McClellan, according to the documentary, gets a job at Clark's law firm. Clark was Lyndon's lawyer. Yeah. And so he knew from the legal work that they did how much Lyndon was worth when he left office.
Right. Yeah, he had up close and personal visibility over all of that. And then he started talking about Ed Clark. I've researched that gentleman. Fascinating, mind-blowing. I think it was Ed that owned not the book repository, but the building next door to it. And one of the shooters was supposedly shooting out of that building. So you start to look at the ownership of those buildings, and those tied to LBJ.
Yeah, which is...
But Ed Clark was known, he supposedly bragged about being involved in the assassination, before he had passed away. So
what just... wait, the question went out of my head for a moment there. Hold on, let me gather my thoughts. Because this was an important question. Oh, yes. So Did anything come out on Clark or any of these people in the JFK documents that you've seen?
I haven't seen anything about it. I mean, I spent a little while starting to research and go through and got real bored real quick.
Kind of like getting discovery from the government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I do not have time for
they
this.
Give you 50 million pages you don't need.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find the 3 that you do.
Right. But I didn't see anything come out about Ed at all in there. And so Glenn Beck's team, they ran all of those documents through some AI platform to kind of help decipher it all.
Yes.
And it'd be worth asking. I'd be curious if I talked to them. But the reality is the Warren Commission that investigated it all, the folks that they put on there, I mean, JFK fired Alan Dulles.
And they put him on there.
And Charles Cabell from the CIA. And Alan Dulles was the head of it. So JFK's sworn enemy, basically, headed up the investigation into it. And there's a recording, you can look it up, LBJ and J. Edgar Hoover talking like 5 days after the assassination. It's on YouTube. Basically figuring out who they're going to put on the Warren Commission. They stacked that whole thing to cover up their own trail. Yeah.
Well, Alan Dulles is, he's something else. He's the guy who protected the Nazis of Ukraine from the Nuremberg trials and, you know, and a whole, so
it goes deeper than this.
Oh, yeah. Alan Dulles is, he's a very interesting person, someone really worth taking a close look at. Yeah. Okay, so what did you learn from this, watching this documentary? When was the first time you saw it?
I probably watched this the first time maybe in 2013, 14, 15, somewhere in that time frame. And the biggest thing I took away from it, which was kind of mind-blowing, was, you know, just later on, and Keith and I kind of looked at it earlier, but it talks about the fingerprints of Malcolm Wallace being found in the book repository or book depository in that room. So one fingerprint that's a 36-point match, they say that's a home run in any type of detective work. And that was found in the book depository.
Which is the building where they alleged the shot that killed JFK was fired from.
Exactly. So what was Malcolm Wallace doing there? LBJ's hitman. And you've got Lee Harvey Oswald saying, I'm a patsy. I didn't do anything. Bill Decker, we already talked about him. They're the ones that rounded him up and arrested him. Malcolm Wallace, there's several folks that saw somebody that matched the description of Malcolm there that day outside of the book depository. And we know that he was killing people for Lyndon. So probably makes sense that he would have had Mac involved. Like, what else was he doing?
Let's see that part.
The fingerprint is the ultimate part of the Mac Wallace story. The FBI fingerprinted every Texas School Book Depository employee, including the women employees that worked downstairs, never handled the boxes. They fingerprinted every Dallas officer that was in the sniper's nest so that they could remove those fingerprints from consideration. At the end of the day, you have one fingerprint remaining. It sits in the National Archives for 35 years, until 1998.
Nathan Darby is one of the most experienced fingerprint experts in the United States, with 35 years service in the U.S. military and the City of Austin Police Department.
I didn't know where it came from, and a week or 10 days later, I called the party and that had brought it over and said, well, it's a match. The finger that made the ink print also made the latent, and we called that a match or identified. And there was no question about it. They matched.
3 years later, Nathan Darby readdressed the same evidence and reconfirmed his original findings.
When he was done, he had a 34-point match. And when you mention that in criminal circles to an investigator, how confident would you feel with a 34-point match? Oh, that's a slam dunk. It can't miss. It doesn't get any better than that. You give me a 34-point match on any case in the United States, I'll take it to court and win.
The inked and the latent print are made by the same finger. And the other evidence that I've been presented with was Malcolm Wallace's left little finger, without a reasonable doubt.
Of course, the FBI said it didn't match. I mean, these days, who believes the FBI?
Nobody.
Nobody. But back then, you know, if the FBI said something, I mean...
Yeah, we listened to doctors and the CIA, the FBI, everybody back
Disney.
then. Yeah, Disney. There you go.
They said we do family movies. We were like, oh, yeah, good to go.
Right.
Yeah, we believed everybody.
Yeah, Cinderella story.
It's crazy. So the whole thing here is that, according to this documentary, finding that fingerprint there, finding Mac Wallace's fingerprint would be a link to LBJ. The other link would be who owning the building next to that?
Yeah, there's, I think Ed Clark may have owned one of them. There's another owner, in fact.
Ed Clark, who was Lyndon's lawyer.
Yes. And then there was the one that owned the school book depository. He was a big hunter. And he had, you know, elephants and giraffes and rhinos, whatever, in his trophy room.
Yeah.
He also had the frame. This is supposedly, I haven't confirmed this by research, but I've heard it from a couple of people. The frame of the window from the 6th floor that Malcolm Wallace or Lee Harvey shot out of.
Yeah.
He had that put up in his trophy room. So basically, it's like a president was one of his trophies.
Okay, so, well, yeah, that's interesting. What is your theory? After all this time and all the work that you've done, what do you think happened?
So, I mean, it's easy. It's so easy.
The truth usually is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you, like, listen to this whole thing, listen to this tape, spend a little bit of time looking up, say, the LBJ and J. Edgar Hoover conversation, listen to Madeline Brown's discussion, hour-long with a gentleman named Kyle. That's on YouTube. Madeline was LBJ's mistress. And listen to all the names. Listen to all the people that were there at Clint Murchison's house the night before the assassination happened at a big party. Lyndon came in. Look at what happened with all of those people. And they just rose to massive levels of power and wealth. Got away with everything. And it's a lot of names that were mentioned here.
It's funny that you mentioned Madeline Brown because, interestingly, my husband's grandfather was best friends with Lady Bird Johnson, Lyndon's wife.
Oh, wow. She probably didn't like Madeline.
She probably did not. If she knew about Madeline, she probably did not like her.
Yeah.
But that's how, you know, that's how crazy and kind of recent and close all of this is, right? I mean, when you're in Texas, there's a lot of living connections to this.
Yeah, it's the amount of random things that have happened of like people I meet and they're like, oh, I knew this person or no, I'm attached to this person and how it's all happened. It's kind of crazy. It's like it's meant to be.
Were you disappointed then when I know you said that, you know, you were only expecting, you know, a little bit from the documents and that people don't really write any of this down, but were you hoping for something that could confirm what you thought?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping for a little bit of cover fire on the deal, but now it's kind of like I feel a little bit isolated and
like
alone
you're on
out
the
there.
50-yard line at the Super Bowl and you're looking around and there's just nobody.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
I was thinking that there'd be
you get
something
used to it, Shane.
that would validate some of it. But it's okay. Like it's whatever my journey is, and I felt like God, you know, it was time to release it, and I do want the American public to know the truth. You know, it would be nice for history to set the record straight on all of this. It'd be nice for, you know, somebody from LBJ's camp or the CIA camp or FBI to come clean on it. But I truly believe until they come clean and we make changes to where they can't come in and assassinate a president again, that we don't have a real democracy. It may feel like it. We may think we're electing our presidents. We did elect President Trump, but it took a lot of people working really hard on the election integrity side of things.
And stopping the fraud.
But I don't think we've elected a whole lot of presidents in the last 40, 50, 60 years.
That they've been selected for us rather than elected?
Yeah.
And why do you say that?
Well, I mean, if you look at how Lyndon got into office, the Box 13 scandal. You look at
Well,
Trump.
and let's explain that Box 13 scandal is when they found 200 votes. They said in the documentary, 201 votes, but it's written that it's 202 votes, 200 to Lyndon, and he was in a runoff, right, with Coke Stevenson, and that 2 votes went to Coke and the other 200 went to him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Disproportionate there.
Yeah. But does that sound a lot like mail-in ballots?
Exactly. So mail-in ballots,
It's still
Eric is the other
happening.
thing. I mean, I'm on the board of this thing called Citizen AG. And so collectively, Mike Yoder's the attorney that was really the mastermind behind it. But we hosted an election integrity summit, and all these folks of Lindell's team, the Citizen AG team, Moms for America, Sharona, but like everybody kind of came in, and I think that crew collectively helped block 4.5 million illegal votes. And so I think there are other folks fighting it out there as well. So,
Well, and Doge has been finding a lot of that evidence, and I've been working with Joe Hoft, Jim Hoft's brother. They're twins, and Joe was working with a team. They've been studying the election in Orange County, and he said 1 in 5 voters was either a phantom voter, like there's no record of them existing, or a non-citizen. I mean, it's how many other races. When people are so focused on the presidential election, it leaves the down ballot races fair game.
right. Yeah, and there's so much more. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast if you're interested in doing it with Yoder. But I'm fairly well convinced after spending a decent amount of time in California and getting to know a lot of the folks out there, I think that's a red state.
There's a lot of people who feel that way.
There are not nearly as many kind of lunatics or whatever as they make it out to be. Like
It's hard to find anyone who likes Gavin Newsom when you go to California.
Right.
Yet he won the recall with more than 60% of the vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, explain that one.
Yep.
Well, okay, if LBJ ordered the assassination of John F. Kennedy, then what's your theory on who was really behind it? Because even if Mac Wallace was present and they found his fingerprint in the building, there are a number of ballistics experts that I've spoken to over the years who don't believe that the shot that killed LBJ came from those buildings.
Right.
That it really came from the drain, the stormwater drain, that it was a sniper, if you look at the trajectory of the bullet. So,
Right.
and there was a pulley system inside that drain that he could have used, well, that they believe he used to get himself in and out.
Yeah. Yeah, at this point, anybody that still believes the lone gunman theory and Lee Harvey Oswald, you're just misinformed and you're not trying at all.
Kind of like the lone gunman theory at Butler, Pennsylvania.
100%. Which
Speak to anyone in ballistics and they don't believe it.
Yeah, it's just not the case. And they use the same playbook on that one as well.
Well, and the thing that kills me is the way Jack Ruby assassinated him. How convenient.
Yeah.
How convenient.
So if you go down this rabbit trail of look up James Files' interview, he's talking about coming down, part of the mob from Chicago, and him being one of the shooters behind the fence. And we know that there was a shooter behind the fence. And, there were multiple shots, different areas. Mm-hmm. Everybody said it was behind the fence. Mm-hmm. And so he takes credit for it. And the way his story aligns with a lot of the facts, I don't know the guy, I haven't talked to him, but it seems very legitimate. And Abraham Bolden, he was the first ever African-American black man that was assigned to a president in the Secret Service. Go on and listen to his interview about what he heard between LBJ and the Kennedys in the Oval Office and what he reported. And then he went and spent time in prison afterwards because LBJ wasn't having that, right? But
what did he say? Do you remember?
Yeah, so he remembers a battle in the Oval Office. So LBJ comes pulling up in a limo, gets out, has I think somebody with him, goes in. It's Bobby Kennedy and JFK inside. And it's an explosive argument. He thinks he hears Billy Sol Estes' name and something to the effect of, "You sons of bitches keep effing with me, you're going to find out," type of deal. And so he reported that as a threat, that he felt the vice president had threatened the lives of Bobby and JFK. And a lot of people think, oh my gosh, this tape just shows that it was just LBJ. It was not LBJ. No. I'm convinced that there was CIA involvement. Mm-hmm. I don't see how there wasn't. If you just start to look at Alan Dulles being involved, Charles Cabell, his brother was the mayor. Earl Cabell was the mayor of Dallas at the time. They had plenty of incentive to cover it up.
What
The
about
FBI.
Standard Oil?
Who owns Standard Oil?
The Bushes?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can go back even to World War II and Bush being involved with the banking system and funding supposedly the Nazis and getting in trouble over that. But
And see if that leads you to Dallas, Texas on that fateful day.
yeah, and I think folks that were involved in the CIA shortly after that probably knew as well because they wanted to continue the cover-up, and that's where you have Bush coming in.
Well, there are folks that will tell you that everything you're looking at is a long intelligence operation that the CIA has been involved from the very beginning, and they still are.
And if you want to get to where, and this is where I think people probably still get in trouble if they go too far down this path, and that's Executive Order 1110, which that was signed in by JFK about 6 months before he was assassinated. And that had to do with the U.S. being able to issue silver-backed notes, which was essentially a way around the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve we don't really mess with. Like they make
Donald
trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
And that seems to be what gets people in trouble. And so if you look at actions, I believe it was on the airplane. So Lyndon got sworn in after the assassination, and then one of his first orders of business was to start to unwind and sign documents to unwind Executive Order 1110. So basically saying, no, the U.S. cannot issue silverback notes. We have to rely more heavily on the Federal Reserve.
Wouldn't it be crazy if you were, for all these years, sitting on evidence that the Vice President of the United States and his cohorts were involved in the assassination of JFK? That'd be crazy.
And yeah, it is crazy, I think. It feels crazy.
What do the rest of your family think?
They all think the same thing, I believe. Now, the folks that are closer to it just want it to be in the past. I'm a grandson, but the folks, the daughters, the brothers, that close-in family that had to live with being wiretapped their whole life and all that, they're just like, let it go. Forget about it. But to me, I think the truth is more important than that, and I just don't think people should get away with killing presidents and there be no recourse and them have still the same power today that they did back then to where they're unchecked.
What about your grandmother? Did you get anything out of her?
No. Patsy was her name. Sweetest lady. I mean, absolute saint. And Saul lived with us in Abilene for a while because she was fed up with him at times. But
so she sent him to live with you?
Yeah. He lived with us for a while in Abilene. She lived in Brady in this really cool house, has an atrium in it with banana trees and palm trees. My granddad had bought it for her parents. But she was saying she never talked about any of it, though. She had to work 3 jobs and help, like literally sewed my mom and aunts and uncles' clothes because they took everything. They were completely broke.
Wow.
So she didn't like talking about it either. She passed away, a long time ago. She passed away way before Saul did.
And you said that there are a few other people that have tapes. Are you going to hunt them down?
One of them, I've got a guy on it trying to find them, and those would be his tapes. He knows the lady, he knows the situation, and so he's interested. He's like, I may have to have you help me talk to this lady. And had another guy, a Hispanic guy out of San Antonio, saying that he has some tapes, but he wanted me to buy them from him. And the more I researched it, the more and more I felt like it probably may have been like a little bit of a scam. But there's supposedly a lot more out there. And I've thought about doing like a docuseries. In fact, one of the folks that I've mentioned earlier, he's interested in helping be involved and fund that, to try and research it and go dig some of this stuff up and find it, but then basically take the viewers along on the journey of like, this is where we're going, let's see what we find.
It's amazing that after all these years and all the documents that have been released now, I feel like we're not even any closer to the truth. Do you?
Not really. No, I mean, I don't know how much information has to be released for, say, you know, the guilty parties to come clean and say, all right, my bad, I did it. And I don't know that we'll ever get that.
Well, and a lot of them may be dead.
Mm-hmm. A lot of them are dead. There's still a few folks alive that were around at that time, but, you know, we're at 63 years now. So they're getting up in age. But I think there's still folks out there that know.
And, I mean, expecting the CIA to tell on itself is a little ridiculous.
I know. They're probably not going to do that, huh?
Probably not. Anyone who knows me knows I'm pretty particular about the information that I put out there, which means I really only want to bring you information about products from people that I truly believe in. You know, so that means the best products put out by the very best people. And for me, when it comes to nutrition and health, I love what Ascent Nutrition is doing because I know that they are not going to settle for anything less than the best, and that they really are on a mission to make health accessible to as many people as they can. And how do they do that? Well, for them, it's really important to source organic and wild harvested products that they put a lot of work into finding from some of the cleanest places on earth. Two of the products that, you know, I'm really familiar with are the pine needle extract, which actually tastes better than you think, and humic and fulvic acid, which is what I take every day, both incredibly important for this moment with everything we've been through with COVID, and as we learn more and more about why healthy detoxing is important for gut health and brain function. I also love organic lion's mane and agarikon mushroom powders. The South African me likes the lion's mane part. These can also be good for your pets, your cats and dogs, and, you know, no shortage of cats and dogs around this podcast. And if you're a coffee drinker, which I am, they have an organic mold and mycotoxin-free coffee, which is pretty amazing. I actually love the taste of it. I do remember the first time I had their coffee. It was a freezing cold day and was full of rain, you know, and I was very happy to get that hot steaming cup of coffee, which is where I had the pleasure of meeting the founder of Ascent Nutrition, who is a great guy, Lance Shuttler. And what I appreciate about Lance is how aware he is of the bigger picture that's been going on in the world over the last few years, and how he has created these products with that in mind, and how important it is to him to try to protect us from the many different toxins that we've been exposed to. If you want to find out more about what Ascent Nutrition is doing, you can go to goascentnutrition.com/Lara. That's goascentnutrition.com/Lara. I really do want to say a very genuine thank you to Lance for supporting our podcast, for being willing to go rogue with Lara Logan and my team, and for being a supporter of our work. The only question I have is, Lance is willing to go rogue. Are you? So Luke's got a question. What do you got a question?
I have a question. Are y'all familiar with the photograph called The Wink?
I'm not. This is the first I've heard of it.
Okay, well, it's a famous photo that, you know, I've known since hearing, and I was very interested to watch JFK when the assassination. What was the movie? Sorry. Oliver Stone, JFK.
Yeah. I'm thinking, does he mean JFK?
Yeah, but you know, LBJ's involvement and all that. There was this photo that has kind of resurfaced since the files come out, called The Wink, nicknamed The Wink, but it's Albert Thomas, who was rep back then, was also good friends with him, and it's upon his being sworn in 3 or 4 hours after JFK's assassination on Air Force One, and he smiles back at Albert Thomas, and Thomas looks back and winks at him, and this photo was caught.
So this is the photo of the wink?
That is the wink, and Jackie O is literally covered in the president's blood, her husband's blood, and he smiles. At the other angle is
that Lady Bird there next to Lyndon?
That's Lady Bird.
Yeah, very telling. And that's where you just have to start putting together pieces just like that. I need to document that on my little timeline that I've put together of all this stuff, because at some point I want to do like a big wire diagram to show all of these pieces that keep coming together.
What you would call circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, and it's just so much that to me, it's adequate.
Well, I mean, I got to say, when you look at it just from the outside, you're like, okay, so, who benefited the most?
Right. And
I mean, that's usually your killer.
They all did. I mean, you look at even the mafia.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe Kennedy, he was involved in the mob, and he used his connections with his buddies, like the Teamsters, the mob, to get his sons in office, really to get JFK in office. But his promise was they wouldn't be going after the mafia. Well, Joe had a stroke right after the election and didn't get to pass along the message. So Bobby Kennedy becomes USAG. He starts going after white-collar crime and the mafia. They're like, who are you? Like, do you realize we just got you elected and now you're coming after us? So they kind of vowed that they were never going to let him get away with that and that it was never over.
What's interesting about your story, Shane, is that we talk about your grandfather being smeared, and being the fall guy for LBJ. And in a way, that's kind of like cancel culture today, right?
Mm-hmm.
How has that affected you as that's passed down over the generations?
One thing I will say, like, I think we got judged in Abilene a little bit for my granddad living with us, and probably some parents of like, no, y'all aren't going over to the Stevens house type of deal. But I'm honestly thankful for it, because like, I don't care who judges me. Like, I know my relationship with God. I know who I'm going to be judged by at the end. And it's really helped me in business. Some people, may say, well, you're a narcissist. You don't care what people think. I mean, I care. I'm not out to hurt anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I know people are going to judge me based on things that are outside of my control. And that's their problem. It's not mine. So it's really hardened me to where I can kind of deal with stress and pressure and judgment in ways I think most people can't.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It just shows the legacy, though, of what we're living through, that these things don't just go away, do they?
No, I mean, you see the ripple effects through.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've often wondered, like, what would my mom and aunts and uncles, like, what would their lives have looked like? Or my cousins? Because, I mean, you see ripple effects, and then my nieces and nephews, or whatever it'd be, second cousins, third cousins, of how things have really changed for them as compared to, other families that were involved in it, and they were the aggressors, and how things worked out there. But I don't think, if there's generational curses or whatever, I don't think we have that going on in the family. I think we just have to turn it over to God and
well,
let
the good
Him
thing
guide
is
us.
there are prayers for that, to break generational curses.
Yeah, yeah.
I have one I can share with you.
Probably good.
And okay, so my last question: do you think you will ever know the truth in your lifetime? Will you get the whole truth? Will we get the whole truth?
I don't think so. I think we have to use our own discernment, common sense, logic, deductive reasoning to figure it out, and just look at simply, we 1,000% know that the Warren Commission lied and covered things up.
Mm-hmm.
We 1,000% know that one bullet wasn't some magic bullet that weaved through him.
Yeah. Pinged around and did all kinds of things.
So we know they lied there. And that, to me, it's like, well, they probably lied in a lot of other areas as well. And it's easy to kind of see how they lied. All of this, I mean, my granddad was a character. Bring Cliff Carter in it, you got two pretty reputable folks overall saying the same thing. And then that's then validated by the mistress. That's then validated by Secret Service. Even Jackie Kennedy's Secret Service guy said that there were balls dropped, and a lot of things that usually happen did not happen that day. I just think, shoot holes in it and prove it untrue. But nobody's been able to do any of that yet. Nobody can prove this untrue yet. The Warren Commission, all that, has been proven untrue.
I think this is worth discussing because we're looking at Doge and transparency in government, and we're seeing God reveal a lot of things. Shane, I believe we're living in a Luke 8:17 moment that Everything that is hidden is being revealed, and we're having revelations. But that being said, JFK, made this famous speech where he was talking about secret societies and this cabal, if you will, behind governments in the world that was forming, and he was trying to expose that, and that the CIA was involved in that. And if we think going back, George Bush said he didn't know where he was. He doesn't remember where he was. This is Senior, doesn't recall where he was on one of the most infamous days.
When everybody in America recalls where they were.
My mother, who's here, remembers she was in high school at
I was in
fourth grade, where she was in Dallas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was living in Highland Park with a lot of people that may or may not have been involved, famous families. But George Bush says he doesn't remember or recall, but there's also this photo that has popped up, whether it be true or not, that shows him in Dallas that day. And we know his attachment to the CIA. And so if you put all that together and the conspiracy behind killing an American president, and the secret societies that may or may not have been involved, and someone was trying to expose this, that was our sitting president. Let's play this and then we'll get y'all's reaction.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary.
So when you hear that, you know what strikes me is that we spend all this time talking about, trying to figure out what's going on, and there was JFK, and he already knew. I mean, everything people talk about today is exactly what he just talked about in that speech from the Waldorf Astoria on April 27th, 1961.
Bobby Kennedy said after the assassination, he said, "I knew that they were coming after us, but I thought it was going to be me." So they weren't surprised. They knew what they were going up against. They knew the battle that they were facing. And Luke, I'm glad you brought all that up. I hadn't heard that whole speech. I'd heard little excerpts from it. But really what he's almost saying, and I think some of it, I've seen stuff on the Skull and Bones Society.
Yeah.
And And we know who was involved in that.
George Bush, Sr.
Right.
And Junior, many of them, generations of the Bushes, right?
Exactly. But what he's basically saying is we're at war. And it's a war of good versus evil. And you're either on the side of good, you're on the side of bad, or you're ignorant at this point in time and just kind of oblivious to what's going on around us. Because I do see so many people trying to share the truth, and I see people mad about the truth coming out. And I think it's just, I don't get that side of it, of being upset about it. And I think that's just the difference in good versus evil and the battle that we're fighting. And I think we're living in historic times right now to where we're going to see good win. We know we win in the end, but I think we're right in the middle of it, the throes of it right now.
It's exactly, I mean, where we are today. Spiritual battle, good and evil. What do you think, Luke?
I think, truth, the opposite of truth is lies, and God is revealing truth to combat all the lies and we haven't realized how much we've been lied to. Nothing's new under the sun, but I think God is pulling back the curtain and revealing how much evil it is. And I think a lot of people spiritually are blown away because they don't work in these covert secret means that JFK was talking about, that they aren't part of these secret societies and are trying to control the world through this globalism. And so it's making people search for truth and want to know what is truth and what is lie, and wakes people up, we're seeing an awakening, right?
Right.
And there's still people under the spell that are so deceived. And so they're angry when they're cognitive dissonance, when they're challenged because their worldview, this doesn't fit my worldview.
Right.
So, right.
Well,
So
there's
I think Keith may have
a quote that I saw the other day, and it said, it's much easier to deceive a man than it is to convince a man that he's been deceived. And so it is hard. And I think people have to go through like the whole guilt, anger, blame, whatever cycle to get through this, to get to the truth, because we have been deceived. And that's tough to admit. But if they kind of open their eyes to this, then it's like, okay, there's a whole world of deception out there. And, frankly, I almost wish I could go to that side of it, because I think it comes from a place of like sincere naivety, of being that naive about the evils of the world around us. And it'd be nice to go to sleep at night just thinking that, there's sheep jumping across the moon in my dreams and everything's good, but I don't see the world that way.
Well, the thing is, for me, I've reached the point where people will come to me all the time, and often say, thank you for standing up for the truth, and thanks for being a voice, and I'm very grateful for that. But I also wonder, I want to ask them sometimes, why don't you have to do anything? Why is it just up to me, or to you, or to somebody else who's in the firing line? And why do you get a free pass and you get to live blissfully unaware, or you may not be unaware, but you're still living your life, taking care of everything within your orbit, and expecting somebody else to do the hard work or the heavy lift. And maybe that sounds a little bit harsh, and I don't mean it to sound harsh, because I'm very grateful for I'm grateful actually to be able to stand for the truth and to speak up. So, and I couldn't do that without people out there who want to hear it and supporting me. So I don't mean it in a pejorative way at all. I just mean it very sincerely. Why is it up to me and other people like me and not up to you? What's interesting to me is what makes people think they get a free pass.
Right.
And the other thing that speech, reminds me of is General Flynn, actually. General Mike Flynn was someone who said to me many years ago, more than a decade ago, that these secret societies will be part of their undoing. These secret societies and their symbolism that they use.
Oh, yes. You see it everywhere.
The symbolism is their undoing, and the secret societies are the root of that evil. And what's particularly interesting about that right now is that, General Flynn is now on the board at West Point on the visitors board, and people might look at that and think that's kind of an odd appointment for him. You know, this is a man who was national security advisor, and he could, I mean, there's any job, almost any job in the administration that he could do in his sleep. So why is he there? Well, the first thing I thought of when I saw that was the West Point Protection Society, the secret society at West Point that is active in within the military. And my money, I haven't spoken to General Flynn about this, but I don't really need to. My money's on that society's days being numbered. You know, there are secret societies all over the place. And they give themselves away, I think, because so many of them are rooted in the devil, in Satan, right? And Satan, you're not allowed to deny Satan.
Mm-mm. No, they have to show it through their music videos and, you know, perform on it. But when you're talking about like, why me, or why us? Like, why is it just a few standing up? I wish I could get this quote out of my head, but it's we're only one generation away from a failed democracy at any given time. So it takes constantly next generation standing up and fighting within the democracy, or else it's going to die. And so you've been on the front lines, you know, way more so than others. And then something that was mind-blowing to me is I went to this graduation. I think I was there for 3 days. And so they let us participate in what's called War College. It's at Schofield Barracks in Pennsylvania. And one of my buddies was graduating from that. And I go in, Trump was in office at the time. It's supposed to be apolitical. But I went in and, you know, there were a few things, and they were talking about the biggest threats to the U.S., and so they had them mapped out. And so at the time, Islam had been growing pretty rapidly in the U.S. I was like, yeah, I don't see Islam there on there. And they're like, we have folks from Pakistan here. I was like, so? This is still a big threat. Look at what they've done in other countries. We're going to have problems. And that you couldn't talk about that. And then you couldn't say anything positive about Trump or anything negative about Obama. But they could all speak positively about Obama and negative about Trump. And so those are the folks that are going to fill the general ranks, the Pentagon, and they were literally grooming and promoting who, you know, most of them were, I know a lot of military folks, and I know when I see somebody that's strong and I'd be like, you know, I'd go to war with you, or I'd, you know, hide behind you, foxhole type of deal. A lot of these guys are not the guys I'd want to be in a foxhole with.
No.
And those are the ones that they were pushing at the time up into the Pentagon, and I assume a ton of them are still there.
Yeah, not for long. We can hope. What it feels like, the legacy of the JFK's assassination, and what makes your grandfather's story and his testimony in these tapes that you have left behind. You know, why does it matter? Well, it matters because we're still living the effects of that assassination, and we've never really had the truth.
Right. And it's, to me, I look at a lot of the things that happen today, and we're trying to, you know, attack this, attack that. We're just basically pulling the top of the weed off. We're not going to the roots of it.
No.
So to get to the roots, you have to go back to JFK assassination. And frankly, I think you have to go back further to some stuff that happened in the 30s and Jekyll Island and all that. But, you know, we're not pulling things up by the roots.
No, and not only are we not doing that, but what use is it to fire Dr. Fauci when, you know, how many millions of people died and he's not held accountable? Oh, he doesn't have his cushy job anymore. What a shame. You know, he doesn't have his security, private taxpayer-funded security detail. What a shame. That's not the same thing as being held accountable for the fact that you knowingly let, you know, you put a medical treatment onto the market that you knew had caused women to lose their babies in clinical trials.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just as a start, or caused permanent heart damage to young people. From,
cancer.
You know, from which there's no reversing, right? It's like that's not accountability. And the purpose of accountability is not revenge. It's not retribution, even though people cast it that way. It's actually making sure that evil isn't left to replicate itself and grow.
Right. And on that, if there's attorney generals out there, so Fauci can still be held accountable from the states, but most attorney generals have to get a referral from a DA in their state to go after it, ideally from a large populace. But unfortunately, here in Texas, our 5 biggest cities are all run by Soros-funded DAs.
I have a better one for you. How about crimes against humanity? There's no statute of limitations, and the penalty is death.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the largest genocides in the last, 50 years, I think.
Right.
I mean, the amount of people that it has killed, will continue to kill, it's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, and lives destroyed.
That's a good approach.
Yes. Yeah.
Somebody should take her up on that.
So, one interesting thing I wanted to add is, the term conspiracy theorist started because of JFK to basically
created
as a
by
dog
the CIA,
whistle, created by the CIA as a dog whistle term
to silence people.
But us conspiracy theorists are kind of winning these days, and
Yeah.
it's weird that it comes back now. full
Speak for
circle to
yourself,
JFK.
Luke. I'm a journalist, not a conspiracy theorist.
You're the true journalist. I'm just here hanging out. So, but it's just interesting that we've come full circle, from that term to what has been revealed. And JFK started it, where he was trying to, expose the deep state and the globalist cabal and what they were doing, and he was taken out. And now here we are talking about, finally the truth around JFK.
Oh, in a
He's
sense,
trying to come out.
Trump would have been JFK if Butler, Pennsylvania had been different, right? I mean, the next person trying to expose the deep state and really continued the work of JFK. JFK was going after the Fed, I mean, all the things that Trump is doing, JFK was doing them.
And that's why I spent so much time and money to try and get that tape to Trump and Trump Jr. I'm like,
Trump Jr., you mean Don Jr.?
Don Jr., yes.
Well, what about Eric?
I have not gotten it to Eric. I never got it to him. I didn't know him. But I did get it to Don Jr. and supposedly to President Trump over in West Palm in 2022. But it's because he poses the same threat.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of this is right, which, you asked earlier, like, what do I think? Deep down, I know that this, collectively, between all the research I've done, I probably have 50% of it put together. Like, I know in my heart. I don't know if I could go prove it in a court of law, but deep down, it just is what it is. And so I'm like, the same structures are in place that were the threat to JFK at the time, still to this day, that are a threat to Trump. So I wanted him to know, and I was trying to hopefully avert the Butler thing. Thank God he missed, and my heart sank that day. But it still hasn't been dealt with.
No. Well, we'll see if we can get this podcast over to him and let him take a look. And, he is fighting a war in about 50 different fronts.
He's got his hands full right now.
He has his hands full right now. But maybe there is someone intrepid in his circle who can bring it to his attention.
They do. I trust he's probably heard some of this as well. But, we just need prayers to keep him alive and keep him safe, because he's doing God's work for sure.
For sure. On behalf of all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and on behalf of myself, Lara Logan, and my team, like, share, subscribe, give, support, do whatever you want. Go to laralogan.com. Make sure that you get as many people as possible to watch this podcast. And thank you so much for going rogue.